Hello, everyone. This is Dave, and we are about ready to start here. The date today is Thursday, March 10th, and I emphasize the 10th because I'll be talking about the 10th of April shortly. So, John Sigren, I see that you have joined. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you just fine. Perfect. And we'll get you to share your screen and impart a lot of information to us in just a few minutes. But let me make a few comments to everyone here, and really want to say welcome to everyone. And it's always great to see more folks driving electric. So a couple of announcements that I want to make before John starts talking is about April 10th, which is Houston Earth Day. Most people know that April 22nd is the traditional Earth Day, and of course it can fall any day of the week. And then the Sunday or so before is usually when Houston has an event, but that falls on Easter this year. So they moved it up to the Sunday before, which I think is Palm Sunday. And so they will do that early, and in place of a meeting, hi folks, that week on that Thursday would normally be our second Thursday of the month meeting. We will replace it with the event on Discovery Green. And what we've done in the past is we've had members bring their cars out, and they're welcome to stay, but they don't have to stay all the time. They can go out and see what's at the other booths and so forth. You can leave your car locked during that time. And a lot of folks are happy to talk about their EVs, which is what we really like. And so everyone can contact us and let us know what their availability is. And our treasurer, Mo, is going to be organizing and keeping a list of who would like to display their car. One of the requirements is that your car cannot move during the event. So they ask that you come and load in early and then leave the car there the whole day. As I say, you personally don't have to stay there, but leave the car there until the end of the day. And that's for safety reasons, because there's just a lot of people going in and out. And what they generally give us is this one long sidewalk. And it's great because then we are in plain view of everybody. And it's hopefully going to be a nice day. It's always been enjoyable in the past as we have had this event before. Okay. And then another event that some of you may have seen the email about is April 30th and May 1st. So I've been contacted by the gentleman who organizes the Heels and Wheels, which is a big car show that occurs in Seabrook, so down in the corner of Harris County. And yeah, thanks. And that way we are having another opportunity to talk to all the EV owners and potential EV owners out there. So the Keels and Wheels is also called the Concours d'Elegance, and they have a lot of nice old wooden boats and a lot of nice old cars. And this year they want to emphasize, I believe they're going to have 4 antique EVs, like the 1912 Baker Electric and some things like that. And they want to compare those with new EVs. So I've asked some folks like our new Ioniq 5 owner and maybe one of our Tesla owners, and we'll see who else we can get, if they would be willing to park their car there for that whole weekend and let other folks see it. The car can stay locked. And that way anything inside is safe from people, but they want to be able to make that comparison of old EVs and new EVs this year. That's their theme. And so normally there's a fee to show cars because it's such a popular event, but there will be no fee if we get folks that are willing to show their car during that time. So those are a couple of announcements. Any other announcements from folks? Anything you know that we need to
Hey Dave,
talk
can we
about?
tell them how to
Yes.
sign up for those events? For instance, Earth Day, they need to send me an email.
Say that again. We couldn't quite hear you in the room here.
I'm just letting you guys know that if you want to be on the Earth Day list of cars that you need to send me an email.
Okay, very good. So an email to Mo, and that will get you on the list. And if you don't have his email, you can just send it to our general Houston txeaa dot or at Google at gmail.com. That'll work as well. And then we'll get it to Mo because as Mo said, he's running that list, and it's a real fun event, but I'm probably going to be out of town myself this time, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would definitely be there. It's just really fun talking to people. Just all of Houston likes to pass through Discovery Green on Earth Day, and Houston Earth Day, as I said, is a bit earlier in case you see it on the calendar as the regular Earth Day. Okay, so if there's no other announcements, got one more person to admit here. All right, so today we have John Sigren, and he is going to talk about the citizens environmental activity going on here in Houston. So we're really glad that we have you here, John, with us today. And so we'll let you go ahead and talk for a little while, if that's okay. And then have a bit of Q&A. And as folks know, often we have two speakers. Today we just have one, so we can quiz John on everything that we can possibly think of. And of course, there's lots going on. So I think this will be a lot of fun to have this interchange with John. So, all right, if there's no other announcements, then I will go ahead and turn it over to you, John.
Thank you. And actually, if you could allow Joe Garfunkel to share his screen, he's going to be presenting our slide deck today.
Okay.
We have 3 CCL members. There's me, Joe Garfunkel, and John Glover.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, Dave, I happened to be running through your website, and I noticed that at the top of the contact page, it says Houston Auto Electric Association.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Actually, we are kind of in the midst of a name change. That is, I'll just mention it real quick. The national organization has changed itself from electric auto to electric vehicle. And we're kind of in the process of doing that ourselves, but that's a good catch, and we'll go ahead and make the change. But perfect. All right. I see your screen here in the room at TXRX. So go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Well, we are very happy to be with y'all, and it sounds like we might see y'all at some Earth Day activities as well, which would be great. So yeah, we are the 3 volunteers from the Houston chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, and we're happy to be with you today. Let's go to the next slide. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, so hello, this is Joe Garfunkel, and I'm a member of Citizens Climate Lobby in Houston. I'm actually the Houston chapter leader. And John Glover, why don't you go next?
Hey, I'm John Glover. You can see there some of the degrees I have, but the main thing is I now volunteer for Citizens Climate Lobby, Climate Interactive, and Solar United Neighbors.
And I'm John Sigren, and I'm our CCL Houston Lobby Coordinator. I coordinate meetings between us and members of Congress. I'm a teacher in HISD. And just as a quick aside, I'm actually in 2 meetings right now. I'm going to be speaking at the HISD board meeting at some point. So if I abruptly turn my camera off and mute myself, that's why. And we would love to hear a little bit about HEAA and how y'all got started and what y'all's kind of main focus is.
Yeah, I can do that here at the beginning. Houston Electric Auto Association has been around for many decades. I myself joined in something like 1994, and I had a lead acid battery powered EV in 1995. And back then, a lot of folks did their own conversions. And we have one member who loves his current conversion, which is, of course, taking a gasoline vehicle with maybe a blown engine or something like that, and taking it out and putting in a large motor, maybe a forklift electric motor or something like that, and batteries and a battery management system and controller and other equipment, and giving that vehicle a second life as electric vehicle. Now, of course, we all know that a lot of the original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, are making electric vehicles. So the nature of our club's kind of changed a little bit. We have folks that have those homebrew conversions, and we have folks that have newly manufactured EVs. And of course, I think just about anybody who sees any news in the country today or around the world sees that a lot of manufacturers are moving in the direction of EVs. And we're seeing competition in battery chemistries and things like that. So we love to talk about those things here at this club, because of course, batteries are critical to the EVs. And so folks get into the details of battery management systems and things like that. And then of course, besides the vehicles themselves, is how they are used and how they are affect society. And of course, we know that there's a lot of polluted areas, and of course, CO2 just circulates around the globe. It doesn't stay in one spot. And so we can improve on those aspects of personal vehicles by switching over to EVs. So all those factors are present in our club.
That's wonderful to hear. And it's great to talk to fellow climate-minded groups like y'all's who are taking the necessary steps that we need to take. So wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And I should also mention that if it's all right with you all, we are recording this meeting. We do that because we have members who can't make it at the scheduled time and they like to catch it later.
Great. Just a little bit about Citizens Climate Lobby. So we are a national and in fact international organization. We're in several dozen countries at this point. We are a nonprofit that's wholly devoted to grassroots advocacy to address climate change. We are a nonpartisan organization. Our members really run the gamut of the political spectrum, from conservative to very, very liberal. And because we have such diverse membership, we really believe in making climate change a bridge issue and not a wedge issue with Americans. And a big part of CCL is empowering local chapters to reach out to organizations, again, that run the political spectrum or just are involved in civil society in general, to try to build a broad coalition of people working to support meaningful climate legislation. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, so here's what we're up against. There's more record-setting temperatures. There's more extreme events, weather events like wildfires, hurricanes, and floods. Rising sea levels that displace low-lying communities, more severe droughts, and increasing ocean temperatures that destroy coral and make the oceans more acidic, disrupting delicate ecosystems. Next slide. So you can see a plot here. Since the 80s, each one of those 4 bars over there is a new decade. The temperatures have increased about 1 degree Celsius. Real costs have increased about 5-fold, and the extreme weather events, the $1 billion events, have increased about 4-fold. Next slide.
So here in Texas, where we are, and luckily in Houston, what does that really mean for us? How do we translate that? So based on the scientific reports coming out, we know that by mid-century, that means by 2050 approximately, we will have 106 or more days each year above 95 degrees here. We're expecting 4,500 heat fatalities each year. And maybe even most concerning here, the farm yields, the farmers will not be able to grow as much as they are right now. There's a forecast of a 39% decrease in corn yields and similar decrease in other products as well. And so from the latest IPCC report, if the folks here are watching the news, you'll know that last week, they just released their latest scientific report with an update on the impacts and when they will be occurring. And so here's a recent article from the New York Times very clearly, right, in the headline, time is running out to avert a harrowing future, climate panel warns. And reading in the bottom left corner, maybe even more extreme here, just quoting, the dangers of climate change are mounting so rapidly that they could soon overwhelm the ability of both nature and humanity to adapt, creating a harrowing future in which floods, fires, and famine will displace millions, species disappear, and the planet is irreversibly damaged. So that's the current finding. So how long do we really have? Well, we think we have until about 2030 in order to cut our global emissions by at least 45% to avoid the worst consequences. And I'll say that as of right now, we are not on track and we're not on target to reach that goal.
So we are not all doom and gloom tonight. It is important to realize the situation, but CCL is a very solutions-driven organization. So the main policy that we advocate for is a carbon fee and dividend policy. And so the way this works is that a fee is charged on greenhouse gas emissions, and that fee is assessed at the first point of sale. So really any fossil fuel producer would have to pay that fee. Under our legislation, that fee starts at $15 per ton of CO2 or CO2 equivalent, because methane would be addressed as well. And then what that fee does is it incentivizes consumers to select more climate-friendly products because it will become cheaper. And consumers will see that they save money if they move away from CO2 heavy energy sources and then also products. It also encourages massive investment in companies to become cleaner, to reduce their carbon footprint. The money that is raised from that fee gets returned to every American household in the form of a monthly dividend check. So this policy is totally carbon neutral. That's one reason why we have a lot of support from across the political spectrum. What that carbon dividend does is it protects Americans, especially low-income Americans, from being hurt by higher prices that they see really throughout the economy from this carbon fee. However, Americans would again see that if you make climate conscious choices, you still get the same dividend check regardless of how big your carbon footprint is. And so the more you reduce your carbon footprint, the more you benefit financially from that dividend. This policy has broad support from climate analysts as well as economists because it is believed that it would reduce greenhouse gases by 40% in a decade and 90% by 2050, and that it is the most economically viable way to see that major greenhouse gas reduction that we need. You can go ahead, Joe. This policy has broad support, as I just mentioned. The current version of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act in the House of Representatives has 95 co-sponsors. When I first joined CCL about 3 years ago, that number was in the 40s. And so we've really seen a lot of growth in support here in recent years. And I do have two highlighted there, the two Texans that are on the bill. That's Veronica Escobar from the El Paso area and Lloyd Dockett from the Austin area. One of the reasons why we are so active in CCL is because we want to see some Houstonians on this list. And that's why we're so excited to talk with groups like y'all and try to broaden our coalition. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Another aspect of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, the third portion, is what's referred to as the carbon border adjustment over on the right-hand side there in gray. And over the next few slides, I'm going to explain in more detail what that actually is and what it means and why is it necessary. So basically, with a price on carbon, that means that for all of our industries here in the United States, they will have a higher cost. And where that really becomes an issue is for international trade across borders. We will always have some countries that are the haves, some that are the have-nots. That means some countries will also impose a carbon price, other countries will not. And so that creates an unlevel playing field for industries in the US if we ever do put a price on carbon. And there needs to be an adjustment made at the border to equalize the trade and make it more competitive for our industries. There's an actual example on the next slide that'll explain that in a little bit more detail. On this slide here, we see two countries. We see China on the left in the red. We see the United States in blue on the right. And this is an example that shows trade going back and forth between China and the US. We're assuming in this example that China will not have a carbon fee or a carbon price, whereas the US will hopefully at some point have a carbon price. So from the right side on the top to the left, if we have exports coming out of the US and we're exporting them from a country that has a carbon price to a country that does not, that's not fair. It puts our industry at a disadvantage. And therefore, as part of this plan, those industries that are exporting in that situation do receive a credit to equalize and to avoid those industries from being unfairly harmed. And the opposite on the bottom shows the example of the US importing products from China. Again, China has no carbon fee. That means that China would have an unfair advantage sending products to the US with a carbon price. And therefore, those products from China then incur an additional import fee. And that equalizes the issue and prevents our businesses from being harmed. And again, getting back to what John mentioned about our organization being bipartisan and seeking support from the left and the right and the middle. Here's a recent article in the E&E News Climate Wire. Senator Kevin Cramer, who's a Republican from North Dakota, was quoted here as saying that, referring to this as an America First energy policy, the senator said he's trying to, quote, soften up his conservative base to the idea of taxing carbon heavy products from China and Russia. And then he goes on to say that I think this is a safe place. He said during a discussion, this is a policy that provides a landing pad for the first step, or at least the next step towards perhaps bigger things. So our representatives in Congress are aware of a carbon fee and dividend policy with a border carbon adjustment. They understand what it means and the importance of it. And now it's just a matter of really pushing that support to get that political will so they can actually go ahead and vote on that.
Okay, so let's look at the benefits of the bill. The major benefit, of course, is that it will allow us, using other policies along with it, to reach net zero by 2050. And by net zero, we mean that greenhouse gas emissions are offset by greenhouse gas removals. And that needs to take place by 2050 if we hope to reach the IPCC's goals. That also includes a reduction of about 40, depending on what week we're in and what report we're looking at, 40, 45, 50% reduction in the next 10 years. But in addition to that, we have co-benefits as shown here. Affordable clean energy saves lives and puts money in your pocket. Let's look at those individually. Next slide.
Okay, so the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act would be very, very good for the economy. As it is, we are spending more and more federal dollars every year dealing with natural disasters and also dealing with the health impacts of climate change as it decreases air quality and things like that. If the Energy Innovation Act is passed, we would see a massive upswell in innovation, especially in clean tech, battery capability, infrastructure to support things like electric vehicles. All of that would become much more valuable as companies figure out how to present a low-cost product to the market. We estimate that 2 million jobs would be created, and I shouldn't say we estimate, economists, 3,500 economists have endorsed this legislation. Economists estimate that we could produce about 2 million jobs, mainly in clean energy, but not just that. With that monthly dividend check, we would expect people to use that extra income that they get to do things like see the doctor more regularly. And we would expect to see growth in healthcare industries and other service industries as a result. Obviously, you guys care a lot about the EV industry. The EV industry represented 2.5% of new car sales in 2019. It's 9% in 2021. With a policy like this, we think that increase would be even more rapid because it would increase demand for electric vehicles throughout the economy. Go ahead, Joe.
Another co-benefit is saves lives, a healthier environment. This policy will improve health and save 4.5 million American lives over the next 50 years by reducing pollution that Americans breathe. Poor air quality is responsible for as many as 1 in 10 American deaths today and sickens thousands more. Those estimates are from studies performed at Duke University and Harvard University. Next slide.
And then the additional benefit is that with the dividend, families get paid. They get what we refer to as cash back. And so in this slide, we're showing that if the bill passed, let's say this year, in 10 years from now, in year 10, an average family of 4 would receive an annual dividend check of roughly almost $3,000 as their dividend back from the revenue that was collected. And once they receive that, families are free to spend that in any way they would like. They can invest that for their children's education if they choose. They can use that as a down payment on a new car or for other expenses. So there's no limitation on how they're able to spend that money, but everybody will get that money back. And the purpose for that is that with a carbon price, everybody realizes and understands that energy costs will go up. They have to go up because that's the disincentive for people to buy additional fossil fuels. And so the real intent is that that money will help compensate for that and reimburse them for their additional expenses of buying more expensive fossil fuels during the transition period.
Okay, so since this is the Electric Car Association, let's see what role EVs can play. Globally, transportation accounts for just 14% of greenhouse gas emissions. In the US, it's 29% because there are a lot more cars in the US than there are around the world in general. That's significant, and we have to convert to electric vehicles, but it is not enough by itself to reach our climate goals. Another reason is that cars are on the road for only about 11 and a half years. So turnover is too slow for what we need to do by 2030 and on up to 2050. And thirdly, EVs must be charged by our renewable sources or a full benefit is not reached. So policies are needed to discourage fossil fuels and encourage renewables. The policy that is most effective toward all of these goals is carbon fee and dividend. Next slide.
And here on this slide, we're just showing that this particular bill, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, has already received a lot of support from other electric vehicle associations. For example, the Las Vegas Electric Vehicle Association, Hawaii, Arkansas, and the Electric Vehicle Club of Connecticut.
So we are happy to, here in a second, answer any questions that you guys have. But in terms of what we would like from you, we would be thrilled if the Houston Electric Auto Association would endorse our legislation, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Things like local businesses, advocacy groups, civil society groups, like what you guys have, mean a lot to Congress members. They like to see support from local communities. We would also love for you to sign up for our monthly calling campaign. So a big part of Citizens Climate Lobby is calling our members of Congress every month to try to put that constant pressure on them to address sustainability issues and specifically carbon dividend legislation. And then lastly, we hope that you would join our Houston chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. We're a bunch of really nice people. We meet monthly. We have our graphic here from our upcoming meeting on March 12th, where we're going to hear from Jim Blackburn, who is a professor of environmental law from Rice University. And yeah, we would love to see you all there. I'm going to put some links in the chat that show you how to do the things I just described, to endorse our legislation, to join our local chapter and get on our newsletter, and to join the monthly calling campaign if you would like to commit to calling monthly to put that pressure on your member of Congress. And Joe, you can go. Yeah. So yeah, we're happy to answer any questions and have a conversation for a while. Dave, I think you're muted. Dave, if you're talking, I can't hear you. Is it just me or can anybody hear
I
Dave?
can't hear him either.
I can't. Dave looks like he's talking, but we can't hear him.
I'm gonna put it in the chat. I think he is.
There, we can hear you now.
No,
Oops,
nope.
went away.
One of those.
Ha ha ha.
My voice coming through?
Yes.
Ah, very good. All right, thank you. All right. So I was just going to comment there, a couple of slides back. You have the logo that the national organization had up until recently, because they changed from the National Electric Auto Association to the Electric Vehicle Association, and they updated their logo a little bit. Looks a little more swoopy now in the car there that's plugged in. And that's on the national website. You can find that. So, but this is great information. I really appreciate you guys doing this as a team of 3 to tell us about all the things you're doing. And the latest on the proposed legislation, that's great that there are more representatives backing it now. And so I'll start off with one question, maybe kind of a tough one, but I think you folks have probably heard this before, is that what about the resistant elements of American society? I can imagine that somebody who likes driving their big diesel truck and pulling their big camping trailer around doesn't want fuel costs to go way up. And I can imagine the chemical industry and oil industry don't like the idea of making their products more expensive for end users, because then people will use less, which of course is the purpose. But as I say, they're going to give you pushback. So what pushback have you gotten and how have you handled it?
Well, there's always pushback on everything, but the nice thing about our bill is with the dividend going back to American households, then in the immediate future after the policy is applied, gasoline may go up. It may go up indeed, but then they'll receive more money than that in return. And so now they're not hurting on money. They're not at a disadvantage, but they still have this opportunity to make a decision that I'd like to double down on this. And now they can get an electric vehicle and they're still receiving the dividend. So it's win-win all the way around.
I'd like to add to that, that as we've seen in the news with Ford, GM, and all the other auto manufacturers, they're coming out with a whole slew of electric vehicles, and their gas-powered cars are slowly going to be phased out. We've already seen that in the news from some automakers where they're stopping all design work on gasoline engines, and they're investing billions of dollars now in EV.
I'd like to add to that as well. Industry leaders know that climate legislation is coming at some point. And there are really 2 options. You can take a regulatory approach or you can take a market-based approach. And we advocate for the market-based approach with the carbon fee. And a lot of industry leaders, including 5 out of the 7 oil and gas giants, have voiced support for carbon dividend legislation. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has said that they would favor a similar policy because they believe that it is more financially viable for them than a heavy regulatory approach to lower emissions.
All right, good that you're out there talking with them.
Let me mention, there is one question in the chat. I'm not sure if you've seen that from Robert Sanchez.
Yes, go ahead. Address that one. I was going to get there, but yeah, I will scoot this on the screen.
I'll read
here.
it out. It says, assuming government does not go with the carbon fee, would the next best thing be to change the transport and energy infrastructure? ? Work to get more electric buses, school buses, government-owned EVs, private EVs like HEAA, renewable energy, putting up solar panels on lower income homes. Some charities do just this. So I'd like to take a first stab at that, and John, you can follow along. I think actually John Glover has already addressed this in the slide that he showed about the electrification and the percentage that's consumed by transportation. And the comments there were that it's definitely a good start. It's needed, but it's not sufficient to get us, over the goal line. More is needed. And the only solution that we are aware of that will push us over that goal line is the carbon fee and dividend, putting a carbon price or a carbon tax on fossil fuels.
All right, great. Thanks for addressing that. Your cohorts there want to chime in?
No, that's what I would have said. There's other.
I'm about to get called into the other meeting, so I need to step away for a minute.
Thank you, John.
All right, so yeah, I'll slide this down in case we have more questions. So folks online, please feel free to put questions in the chat or just break in and verbally ask them. And I will turn this camera around here in the room now so that you there can see here in the room. And focus. Maybe not.
You've got your border on your Facebook.
Oh, that's the, okay. So folks online, if you can see the room here, we've got a room with a number of folks. And so I'll ask folks, yeah, our lights are dimmed at the moment, so we can brighten those up a little bit too. Thank you. And so I think it's going out in focus. It's just me showing it. No, it's going out.
The background.
So we need to update.
You want me to address the question?
So hang on
John, maybe
just
you want to
a
read the
moment.
question so everybody can see that.
There are two very long questions. Do you think that peak oil production can self-correct this issue? The fact that oil companies are using energy, poor tar sands and so on. And said, I raised this question suggestion to a local member of the Sierra Club who moved to Virginia, DC area. If you can't get someone that does not accept climate change, would a better tactic be talking about the particulate matter that gets into our lungs? Well, yeah, taking that last question first, the particulate matter is something that we do bring up and try to, the co-benefits that I talked about, cleaner air are reasons alone for fighting climate, but none of those have the urgency that that climate change brings on. And the peak oil issue, I put that in the same category as maybe a new nuclear power or something in the future is going to solve our energy problems. Well, it's not going to solve it in the next 10 years. And we need to, if we don't start solving the problem in the next 10 years, then the accumulation of carbon dioxide is going to be more than we can get out safely. We're going to have major problems on this planet. And so anything that has that delay is just not going to be good enough. We'd like to do it. It'd be nice to have perfectly clean energy with some new energy source in the future where everybody's got all the energy they want, but we have to solve the problem in the next 10 years.
And I'll just add on to that. So let's assume theoretically that this year, 2022, was the year of peak oil, and there's no additional fossil fuel produced after this year, but we're still at a constant level with that not dropping. That doesn't solve the issue. As John was alluding to, we have all of this CO2, the carbon dioxide, already in the atmosphere, and it's not being drawn out of the atmosphere quickly enough. And so you think of a sink that fills up with water and a drain. That sink is pretty much at the top and overflowing, and the drain we have today is not big enough to drain that water out of the sink to reduce the CO2 already there. It'll continue to be there. And many of the effects from climate change are already baked in. I think I've read articles saying that, for example, sea level rise is going to continue. That's baked in. It's going to continue over the next several decades, regardless of what we do.
True, true.
Yes, those are all good data points. So I'll go ahead and let people in the room, let me turn this toward Bill.
Yeah. And we assume that the senators as well as the leadership in Texas are not buying into what you propose.
Yeah, we couldn't hear the question. It was not loud enough.
I think that microphone's not on.
Can you hear me now?
If you can talk loudly, please.
I'm there. No, there's no volume. What can we do?
See if we can switch to
Can
the
you
computer microphones, and then I can just repeat the question.
work now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
So maybe it's a transmitter distance thing.
Maybe.
Okay, so Bill was asking about what our politicians here in Texas are having to say about the idea of keeping CO2 out of the atmosphere.
Well, that's that's a very interesting topic. So in Texas, Texas leads the entire nation in wind energy. And that's a huge plus for Texas. But on the other hand, our Texas legislature is not helping to make that happen quickly enough. And instead, if you watch the state legislation, they're still trying to impose additional taxes on solar and wind, really to the benefit of fossil fuels. So that's just what it's like here in Texas, right?
I would add to that I'm back, by the way. Citizens Climate Lobby is involved in advocacy work at the state level. We pushed for a resolution last cycle or last legislative session that it was just a symbolic resolution that said that the state of Texas recognizes that climate change is a problem and that it can be addressed in a way that is good for the Texan economy. It was our first time advocating at the state level, and we were able to get it introduced into a committee and to have several Democratic members sign on to the legislation. So we're hopeful that there is room for growth in Texas, and we will be advocating for that in the next legislative session in Texas as well.
There's a very interesting question in the chat now. I'd like to read that out if you haven't seen that. The question is, what about carbon capture devices and planting more trees / bushes? Some have suggested hemp, the legal sibling of cannabis. So I'd like to start off the answer to that. And then John Glover, you'll be able to speak about En-ROADS and planting trees. But in regard to carbon capture, that's a really good topic because it's in the news quite a bit. For those on the more conservative side of the political spectrum, their go-to answer to climate change is carbon capture. But we have an example right here in our own backyard. If you've read the news out in Fort Bend County, there was a pilot carbon capture plant that was referred to as Petronova. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of that. It was built, the Department of Energy provided several billions of dollars because that was a pilot project. It was supposed to test the technology to either prove or disprove whether it worked successfully. And again, in the news most recently, just a year or two ago, the Petronova carbon capture facility actually shut down. It never actually did reach all of its technical objectives that it had hoped to reach. And the reason that it shut down is due to economic reasons. What the Petronova plant was doing was that it was capturing some amount of carbon, and it was pushing that through a pipeline to some oil fields some distance away for the purpose of injecting the carbon into the wells. That's referred to as enhanced oil recovery. So as the price of oil then dropped, it was no longer economic to run the carbon capture unit because it cost a huge amount of money just to run that. And so it was shut down. So in that regard, it was not a success. And we have not seen any evidence of any successful carbon capture plants right now anywhere in the world, unfortunately.
Yes, I have followed that. First of all, can you hear me a little better now?
Yes.
Okay, we changed batteries here. We thought it was a distance transmitter to receiver problem. All right. Yes, that is something that I personally have followed, and I knew that it had closed down. And of course, the mention earlier about the state of Texas leading in wind is something very well known to all the EV drivers, because of course, people who need electricity as a fuel pay attention to where that comes from. Which brings me to another thing that I thought I'd bring up regarding a number of our members have PV, photovoltaics, on their houses. And so I was wondering what the three of you thought about the growth in photovoltaics.
Well, I'll speak to that. I also volunteer for Solar United Neighbors, and I'm the quote champion in Southwest Houston. We just started a co-op that facilitates homeowners getting in the co-op and making a RFP out, a competitive RFP out to multiple companies and getting a group discount on their solar panels. And so if you want to know more about that, then you should have gone to that meeting that started 15 minutes ago. But you can still go to the website, solarunitedneighbors.com. So solar panels, are a great thing. Like I said, we need to be moving off of fossil fuels more onto renewables, and solar is something that is here now, and we need to be using more of that, and that will allow us to, as quickly as possible, get off of fossil fuels. I may mention on the carbon capture, there's two types of carbon capture. When people say there's carbon capture and sequestration, which is what is done when, let's say, coal or natural gas is burned. That is never released into the atmosphere and is captured right there. And so what that does is simply turn natural gas into a clean, unquote, fuel. But that doesn't solve the problem, because now they have to compete with other clean fuels such as solar and wind. And so that's a good thing to do, and we need to develop that technology, but that's not going to give us everything that we need. The direct air capture devices are just not here now to pull carbon dioxide out of the air, but we need to work on that technology, because if you look at simulations that are done on solutions for this whole problem, simply the Carbon Fee and Dividend Act and some of these other things that we're talking about, they are not sufficient themselves. We're going to have some a pretty large amount of successful carbon removals. And so those technologies need to be worked toward. The Trillion Trees initiative is a form of carbon removal, but as you can guess, since I said the problem needs to be addressed in the next 10 years, trillion trees that can't grow to full height in the next 10 years. And so planting lots of trees is very good, but that's not going to solve the problem right now. The Carbon Fee and Dividend is the only big club that we know of that can get us pretty close.
Right. And before we go back to the chat, I'd like to check to see if someone here in the room had.
So how exactly would the dividend work? And how do you divide that? This is just to say all that.
We couldn't hear that.
Question is, maybe it's still the transmitter receiver problem. Can you hear me better when I'm over here?
Yes.
Okay, so more details on the dividend part of the plan.
Sure. So when the carbon fee is assessed, we have basically all the tax mechanisms in place that we need to process the dividend. And so it'd be very similar to the stimulus check, where you would get the dividend as a monthly direct deposit check in the mail. The dividend would start small because the carbon fee would start small. And as the carbon fee ratchets up at $10 a year, then the dividend gets bigger over time. And then ideally, it decreases over time as well as we decarbonize the economy.
So does everybody get the same amount? Or do you?
Yes. Yes, everybody gets the same dividend.
Okay, so you heard that from him. Well, good, because I was going to run over with the microphone again, even doubting it might pick up, but all right, so I guess I don't need to move the mic. It just can catch you across the room as long as the mic.
I'd like to add a little bit more onto the carbon dividend question, though. We've seen examples where other countries have implemented a carbon price, but in some cases, they have not also implemented the carbon dividend. And so what the studies have shown is that in those situations where you have that additional tax, but no additional revenue coming out, it becomes very politically unpopular. And in those cases, it did not succeed the way it should have. And so the dividend really has two purposes. Number one, it is intended to get people through this transition while we're still phasing out fossil fuels, and fossil fuels will become more expensive. So the dividend offsets that. And by having the dividend and the revenue coming in, it becomes revenue neutral, and it becomes much more appealing to those folks that don't want to increase the size of government, right? This will not increase the size of government. Money comes in and the exact same amount of money is supposed to go out. It's not supposed to be spent on any other purpose.
I'd like to add one more thing to that. We've heard some people ask before, why not include it as a tax write-off that people would process once annually? And the answer for that is that it doesn't provide as much benefit to low-income Americans who would need monthly help with the dividend. Economists who have analyzed our carbon dividend policy suggest that 90% of low-income Americans would either come out ahead or break even from the carbon dividend policy.
There's another very good question in the chat, again, from Robert Sanchez. He says, would you consider nuclear power as a good trade-off from coal and natural gas fueled electricity? Some environmentalists actually suggested this as the lesser of many evils. And so, the position of our organization, Citizens Climate Lobby, is that we are what we would call solution neutral, which means that any really good solution that'll get us over that goal line is something that we will be in favor of. If carbon capture worked, then great. We need that in our solution. As it turns out, nuclear power is an excellent solution that we would be in favor of. I know that there are concerns about anything to do with the safety of nuclear power, the radioactivity, how do you store the spent fuel rods and so on. But that would be a definite good solution, and we would be all in favor of that. The issue, however, is that the cost of nuclear power right now has always been much, much more expensive than regular, let's say, natural gas powered fuel generation stations. Nuclear is much, much more expensive than the cost of solar or wind electricity. And from an economic perspective, it doesn't make a lot of economic sense. But if it was cost competitive, then that'd be great for us.
Plus, nuclear is slow. Remember the 10 years that I've been talking about. So if you would pass a policy right now to encourage many new nuclear plants, they wouldn't be here 10 years from now. So,
Right, it's much faster to put solar on a roof or in a field and wind turbines out where they can generate electricity than it is to build a nuclear power plant. Okay, so more questions in the room.
And John Sigren has had to leave. So, but John,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, John is here with me.
Right. Yeah, I see that in the chat there. And as he says, hopefully folks will meet up at Houston Earth Day. So that's always good. So I didn't get a chance to ask John Sigren, but I can ask you, John, and you, Joe. Do you have photovoltaics on your roof?
I'll answer yes, I do. I have panels on my roof. I got it through the co-op a couple of years ago.
Great.
That's the reason I'm working as a leader in the co-op now.
Yeah.
And also have an electric car. So, well, I have a Volt, and of course you know what a Volt is, and but I don't drive more than 10 miles a day. So, I put gas in my Volt about once every 6 months.
And for myself, I do not have solar panels yet. but I am buying my electricity from a utility that provides 100% renewables. And I do have a Tesla Model 3 at home.
Okay. It's okay. You can mention which provider you have if you want to.
So I don't want to mention a specific name, but if you're not aware, there is a Texas government website, which is run by the, I believe it's called the, is it the Texas Utility Commission? I can't remember the exact name. And it has a listing of all the utilities that provide service in the entire state of Texas. It has filters, so you can sort by a lot of different columns. And one of the columns you can filter by is those that provide 100% electricity. I'm sorry, 100% from renewable, whether that be wind or solar. And there's a few out there. So when my wife and I switched just recently, we actually ended up saving 50% on our electricity bill. It cut our rate down by quite a bit. And so, you know, we're happy it saves money for us, but at the same time, you know, we feel good about it.
Right. Very good. Yeah. The Power to Choose website is used by a lot of folks, and they, as you say, can filter on renewable. And it's one of those quirks of the market that here in Texas, as was already mentioned, we've got a high percentage of wind power. And so electricity prices on the wholesale market can actually go negative because, of course, there's no fuel costs for the wind power. And they're always bidding in at the lowest or at zero, because they, in the way that the electricity from the different sources gets put on the Texas grid, it's an auction type system that works with low prices going in. And so, yes, exactly. Renewable energy can be the cheapest because we have so much wind power here in Texas. So turning back to the chat, I see, starting at the bottom real quickly, Seth has put on there, there's also the TexasPowerGuide.com, which is very good as well. But then up above it, Robert, he happens to be our vice president, is mentioning full of questions tonight. Do you think that biofuels such as biodiesel or ethanol from non-food sources is a good trade-off?
So
They truly
sorry.
carbon neutral, take CO2 out of the air when alive, and sadly put it back in when they're dead, die and burn.
So I just read a recent article about ethanol, and I found it very interesting. And this particular study that I read said that the CO2 emissions from ethanol is actually worse than from gasoline. I'm not sure if there's been any additional studies beyond the one that I saw, and this was just recently in the last week or two I saw that. But from what I read, it doesn't seem that ethanol is good for our climate. And as far as biofuels, John, you want to try to take a stab at that?
No, all I know is the probably articles y'all have read about. There's a lot of research in developing biofuels that are clean and are high density, high energy density, but there's no, the problem hadn't been solved yet.
Okay.
Just maybe adding on to that, but in a little bit of a different direction. So, you know, in the news quite a bit now, I've seen many articles about this recently in the Chronicle. There's a lot of discussion about hydrogen, right? I'm sure other people have seen those as well. But it's really critically important to understand the differences in how hydrogen is created. There would be what's called gray hydrogen, which can be produced by burning fossil fuels like coal, which means that even though you end up with a really good, you know, end product, the way you get there is pretty awful. Improving on that a bit is what is referred to as blue hydrogen, which is hydrogen produced from natural gas, which of course is better than burning coal. But neither of those is as good as green hydrogen. And of course, green hydrogen means that hydrogen could be produced through renewable power, wind or solar. And in a study I read just last week, right now, the cost of producing green hydrogen is quite a bit higher than, let's say, blue hydrogen. But the estimate is that within the next 10 years, that cost curve will cross over. And it's anticipated that the green hydrogen will then be much more economical compared to even blue hydrogen. And so it seems that hydrogen is really one of the, you know, future sources of energy that will be extremely helpful. And another way to look at hydrogen, in addition to just powering, you know, transportation, vehicles that have to travel long distances, it's also an energy storage solution. For example, everyone here knows that batteries will store energy. But hydrogen is another way of storing energy. If it's produced through green hydrogen, hydrogen would be produced overnight when wind or solar, either one of the two, is plentiful. And that excess electricity that's generated will be used to create hydrogen. Hydrogen will then be available for future energy needs. So really a whole different way of looking at it, and it's very promising.
Great to hear
Right.
about the-
Hydrogen is the technology. Well, it's similar to electricity. Electricity is not a source of energy. It's a way of transmitting energy around so you can use it at various places. Hydrogen, like you said, it can be a storage in the storage system, or it simply is a way of being packaged for high density energy for airplanes, for example, or ocean liners. And so I think the hydrogen is going to be very important, but let's not mistake it as an energy source. The energy for it is coming from other sources, like a hydrolysis of water for green hydrogen. So in that
Exactly.
case, the hydrolysis has to be done using renewable sources such as solar and wind. So it all gets back to the sun.
It does, yeah. Very good, good. So, more questions from anyone in the room? I don't want to hog on myself, but, so yes, as we mentioned, the source of what is behind that electricity that is fueling our EVs, in the case of folks here in the club, is something that a lot of folks like to look at, and it's very important. So having solar on your own roof is very good. So yeah, glad to hear that you talked about the Solar United Neighbors. And so I know that Dory is also very active in promoting one of the parts of the city for Solar United Neighbors. And so as it happens to be, I myself am on the board of the Houston Renewable Energy Group. And so Dory, of course, is very.
Okay, yeah, and I'm a member of HREG. Hi.
Yeah.
And Dory keeps a number of groups working well, I believe, CCL and Solar United Neighbors and HREG. So
Yep.
in fact, she's running the solar presentation that I said is taking place right now for the next co-op.
Ah, very good, very good. Yeah. Yeah, because we love to see it expand to more people. Solar farms are good, and we've had some of our members go out and tour some of the ones that are around Houston. And utility scale solar is good, but it's also good for individuals to be, actively using their rooftop or roof of an apartment building that might provide solar electricity for several families, or different methods that are getting out to the people. It's great that more folks are thinking about where their electricity comes from, as opposed to, ask a child and they point to the wall socket. That's where the electricity comes from. Education is super important, especially, as I mentioned, for the young folks. So yeah, and on top of just having the solar now, of course, it's much more practical to have battery systems. So we love hearing about our members as they get their battery systems installed, because that means that solar power is not only available during daylight hours, but available for your home during the nighttime hours. And
Yeah.
if you should happen to need to charge your car at night, because you're at work during the day, then of course you're still using solar energy. It's just been temporarily put in your home batteries before being transferred to the car. And for a lot of folks, they're always wondering about how practical long distance travel is with an EV. I actually just arrived last night, or I guess technically this morning, because it was about a half an hour after midnight. I just completed a 4,000-mile trip and drove from Texas over to the East Coast in New Jersey and then into the Midwest. And with my son, we just drove back down here to Texas. And so lots of miles on the car, not a bit of problem. Just charge it up and drive it, and charge it up and drive it. So yeah, about 800-mile trip. It was about 4 charging stops. So we in the club here just love seeing how EVs get to be more and more practical to meet more folks' needs. There was an interview of a couple of folks you might know Nan Hildreth, and she was one of the folks interviewed by KPRC. I haven't looked it up yet, but I heard that she was interviewed by them. And she was asked if EVs are good for everyone, and she admitted, no, not everyone. And I think I would have answered it as almost everyone. Sure, you can always find some outliers, but as you already mentioned with the Volt, if your driving is local, then you hardly ever are going to put gasoline in it. So it's as good as a full battery electric vehicle for someone with that driving
Right.
habit. So when I say almost everyone, it's literally, depends on exactly what your needs are. But even with the long distances now, 800 miles in 15 hours, yeah, it's doable in an EV, as long as the charging network is out there, which of course is improving. And it's getting available for more folks in cities, folks that live in apartments that maybe can't charge where they live. A lot of us, of course, just charge where we plug our cell phones in at night, but getting EV charging out to people in apartments or other places that they can't have their own charging is good. So I'm tickled to hear that both of you are driving EVs. And as I said, I count a Volt as an EV too. It's a matter of how you drive it. So, all right, in the chat, let's see, James Ornstein is posted. Evolve launches RISE Houston. Yes, I read about that today, which stands for Regional Infrastructure Strategy for Electrification. So it exactly has to do with charging. And I did look at it, and there's a report there. I didn't read it real thoroughly. It's about 21 pages. But it's great that Evolve Houston, and often they capitalize the E and the V because they're talking about getting electric vehicles out to folks, is addressing the charging infrastructure question, because that is one thing that is of concern to a lot of folks. That one of our members here, she just drove from Atlanta, Georgia, here, making a few charging stops, no problems, in a brand new EV. And, so it is great to see the different manufacturers now switching over to EVs. I guess Ford is talking about dividing into Ford Blue, which is going to be combustion engine vehicles, and Ford E, or something related to Model E, and that's going to be the emphasis. And I think they're trying to excite a lot of young engineers, is what I think they're trying to do, and get involved with that part of where Ford is going. And so it's great with the fee and dividend plan, because that's also exactly going to get more, I think, young people involved as they see that's the direction that the country wants to go. So, okay, any other questions from folks in the room here, or comments about what cars they're driving? I think it's really good to get more and more folks into EVs. Of course, we've all seen that there are supply chain problems for all kinds of auto manufacturing, which is driving up prices. And yeah, just this last week, of course, gasoline has gone up quite a bit. So I think that there are a number of folks that are happy that they made the switch before prices have gone up even more. I read a headline today that Tesla Model 3s are $1,000 more expensive now than whatever it was a few days ago or something. And I think it has to do with, in my mind, it has to do with supply chain problems, getting materials to build the cars out of. So, and somewhere else I read, I'll see if anybody has read the same thing, that PV panels, they also stop their trend of getting cheaper. And it's also because of materials and supply chain and things like that. We've all kind of gotten used to renewable energy getting cheaper and cheaper, but there's some predictions that it may level off because of these international problems. So how big of a group is CCL? Can you say roughly how many members you have?
So in the Houston metropolitan area, we have roughly about 2,000 members on our mailing list.
Great.
We don't have quite as many that are really active. We wish we had more active members, but we do have quite a large membership. One thing that I'd like to add in closing, I know we're running out of time here. Getting back to the politics in Washington, D.C., what Congress was attempting to do, and with our backing and support, the attempt was to pass this bill through the Senate budget reconciliation process. The budget reconciliation process bill, which was known as Build Back Better, included a lot of different bills all wrapped and lumped together. Some of them had nothing to do with climate. There were quite a few that were involved with climate, but it didn't get enough support in the Senate. It was actually short by one vote. As we know, Senator Manchin would not support it. The issue here is that we're running out of time very, very quickly. With the midterm elections coming up this November, there's a very high probability that President Biden will no longer have a Democratic Senate or a Democratic House. And the odds of getting this type of climate legislation passed become much less probable in the new year. So for those that are interested in becoming, providing this type of political support that we need, contacting your members of Congress through the monthly calling campaign, writing letters, whatever else people might be inclined, this is the critical time. It needs to happen now in the next couple of months so that all of our representatives know that it has the full backing and support from everybody here. They will take a couple of months to push that through and get through all their negotiation process and so forth. But time is running short very, very quickly. So that's how I'd like to end. We're at a critical tipping point right now.
Yes, definitely. Yes, we're such on a knife edge there with the representatives in Washington in the House and Senate. Yeah.
And Dave, I'd like to ask, once you have the video recording, if it's possible for us to get a copy of the web link, we'd really appreciate that as well. And thank you so much for asking us to join and provide our presentation. We really appreciate it.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
thank you.
A few days after we finish here, it will be posted on our website. So you can go to HEAA.org. And that is the easiest way to access it. Will that allow them to save a copy? Or I'm asking Colin here in the room.
It's also available on YouTube. It's maybe easier.
Okay, and so also you can search YouTube and find it posted there, and that might be an easier way for you to pull your own copy, or you can just refer people to the YouTube link once it's established. It'll be there. I see Steve.
Yeah, there was a
Steve
question
Hannahan
about how to join the meeting with Jim Blackburn on this Saturday. It'll be on our Zoom. I don't have that web link handy. David, if it's all right, I can respond back by email directly to you, and if you could just pass that along. But it will be
Yes.
via Zoom.
Okay. very good.
And that's
Yeah, I can pass-
at Saturday starting at 10:30 a.m.
Very good. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. I need to get over to my solar meeting now, so.
Yeah. This is great. Yeah, it's a nice problem to have when we have so many of these related activities that are
Right.
overlapping. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks to
Thank
all
you.
three of you. We
Thank
really
you. Thank you.
appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
Bye-bye. Okay, we'll leave the link up with folks just so I can reiterate about our activities coming up. So, of course, any activities that you all want to do related to CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby, that's great, and SUN, Solar United Neighbors. As folks have heard me say before, which comes first, the PV or the EV, where it's practical. Some have one first, some have the other, but the total going after both just keeps increasing. It's quite high because we do care about where our electricity comes from. You can do it, obtain your electricity different ways, and that's the great thing about the times that we're living in. So that's the one thing, and then the 10th of April. So you saw the email. You can directly respond to Mo, our treasurer, and it's just really fun. Like I said, so anybody who can bring an EV, be out there and talk to folks. It's just really invigorating to do that. Hopefully, weather will be nice that day. If not, you can kind of hide in your car and people come by with umbrellas or something. So, and then, as I mentioned, Heels and Wheels, the Concours d'Elegance, which I've gone to it in past years when I haven't had any kind of EV link. And it's just really inspiring. And all the fees that they charge for people to come and see the cars and boats all go to charity. So folks are coming out there. Yeah, Bill.
Sigren has a question. You spoke several meetings ago about EV charging.
Yeah,
And
you want to give us an update on what's happening?
yeah, sure.
Okay. The bike transmission works best up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love to.
How are you?
Good.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So I think last time I was here, we were talking about. So, I mean, as of Jan 1st, we already moved into make us up here. We have a space and putting charges on the ground. We got sites in Fulshire, we got sites in Fairland. And we're looking at expansive growth in terms of expanding the charging infrastructure itself. So yeah, I mean, we're quite excited and trying to see how we can get to make in America charging. Right now, it's the supply chain issues are also happening on the chargers themselves, right? So we're trying to see how we can sort of get in front of that problem. Because we're always dependent on charger manufacturer right now. We got not a lot of charger manufacturers. So the intention for us is to get our own charger built here.
Okay, good.
So that we are in control of the supply chain.
Uh-huh.
We're in fact making all the charger, most of the charger infrastructure is made here. So the steel is cut here, welded, and
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you don't have these things going halfway around the
No,
world
no,
to
no,
get
no, no.
materials and then all of a
No,
sudden they get cut off.
no. We are partnering with TXRX, trying to hire local
Great.
and have a couple of people, young kids join us through the state
Okay.
because we're in hub zone and all that. So we're trying to encourage that. So I think it's a good wave that we are seeing coming up.
Okay, good. And are you finding customers already?
Yeah.
Perfect.
We are. I think the push is coming back on us. How fast can you guys come in? So we're talking about ramping up, ordering ahead to get a bulk supply of chargers in. And
Good.
so we do all engineering locally here.
I remember you mentioned that
That's right.
before. Yeah,
right,
that's
yeah.
great.
So we do all engineering. So the guys that we're trying to get from the local low income areas, to help with the machining and cutting of steel and
Oh, great.
and
Okay.
we probably also use them to for construction because there's some site ready works that need to happen, right?
Okay.
There's a trenching and construction and cementing and things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So we're trying to get those skills also populated into the
Great.
good stuff.
Yeah.
You asked me an interesting question the other day. We were looking at buying a used EV to test the charger.
Oh,
But the alternative is developing through a load bank hardware and software that would discharge without an EV, but you have to have EV communication between you have to have communication between the load bank and the charger, right?
Correct.
So to make a load bank that has the proper communication in the car in order to start discharging, testing the charger. That's a kind of a hack, and I think you told me that these systems are available, but they're very expensive.
Yeah. So the load bank side is usually expensive because they're designed for. But yeah, I think the idea would be to, if we can take an existing battery system from an EV, decommissioned EV, or almost
yeah.
then because that's what really talks and triggers and controls the charger.
Okay.
Yeah, I need more charge. I got enough. Things like that. So that's what we're talking about, seeing if we can, because we need a load bank in our facility. We're just trying to see if we can buy an EV or lease an EV or get a PHEV, or we just found one in 4.5 miles down in Texas.
Okay.
So I was
So
talking
you're saying
to-
just the battery? out of it?
Well, no, just the vehicle, right? Well, for us, it's
okay.
because we have to test charges out. and all
Okay.
that. So either a vehicle or a load bank. Ideally, load bank would be good because in the shop, rather have a load bank.
Right, because
But-
I was gonna say, unfortunately, the person who's not here today is John Sweet, because he's
Okay.
always getting, for example, out, we talked about the Chevy Volt already,
Okay.
getting a battery out of an
Oh,
older
okay,
Volt,
yeah, yeah,
and-
yeah.
and he's done things like connected up to his home PV system.
Oh,
and things
okay.
like that.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be nice to see if we can connect that to the charger and see that comps going back. and forth.
Yeah.
At that point, you know, we'd have a lot of time to be- Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting stuff. is happening.
yep, yep. So, all right, very good. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
that update. Yeah. So,
I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah. Mhm.
The protocol, communication between the car and the charger, is it different between CCS and whatever the other pattern?
Not so much. So between the vehicle and it varies slightly between the vehicle and the charger. They follow regular electrical communication. It's a PWM communication. So when the car is connected to the charger, the car puts a load. The charger always is on a plus pole or minus pole. So as the load comes in, it steps up, and then that's when the charger knows that, you know, okay, the vehicle is connected.
Mhm.
And after that, the charger puts an extra load and the voltage again drops. So it goes in a step by step change. Because there are two unintelligent machines trying to talk electrically that
Yeah.
something is there and something is ready.
right, yeah.
So the charger puts the load, and that's when the car knows that the load has dropped, which means charge is ready to supply units.
Uh-huh.
And that's when the car starts to put additional load and it starts receiving.
Busy.
And when the car feels like, you know, I have got enough of my low charge
Yeah.
up, then it drops the load.
Mhm.
And when it drops the load, the charger will know that because it's dropped the load, it is ready, it's got what it needed.
Yeah, yeah.
So this communication happens on PWM pulse wave modulation.
You're talking about DC transfer?
It doesn't matter, right? This is the control between the controller and the BMS.
CCS is running into.
CCS runs on a different PoE based. But I'm talking about L2. It could be. I'm talking about level 2. Level 2. Yeah. I think, yeah, they vary subtly, but fundamentally they're all electrical based communication. It's not like a data transfer protocol. It's not like that.
Mhm.
It's more on an electrical.
Yeah, like you said, we're looking for loads. to
They're looking
drop.
for, yes, load drops to communicate to each other.
Mhm.
Whereas we're all used to, you know, cell phone, LAN,
Right, yeah,
that's
that's
data
data.
packets, right? Either Modbus, it's not like that.
Yeah, yeah, simple, but yeah.
Simple, yeah,
load
yeah.
Makes it, yeah.
Yeah, there's no data packet coming in and you know
Right,
interpreting and
just
coding.
measures. the
It's
load.
simple measures load and 4 or 5 steps are there
Mhm.
for 2 systems to talk. And pretty simple.
Okay,
DCFCs are a little bit. That's
yeah, so those would be the
Yeah.
Chatamo or the CCS or
Chatamo.
the Tesla, yeah,
Mhm.
more complex, yeah. Okay. Good, good, good. So, anything else that folks would like to bring up today? Yeah.
You mentioned about getting electricity from other sources.
Yeah.
I got mine. You loaded after, so now I can plug this into my car. Plug other devices into it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's gonna be tiny if we're far away.
So I just
All
plug this
right.
in.
Uh-huh.
J772.
Yeah, yeah.
1772.
1772,
I
yeah.
always get that all mixed up.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just plug it in and then you plug in
Wow,
whatever
yeah,
you want to.
that is fantastic.
So
So the
that- is that
car will
strictly
provide.
10 volts?
Yes.
Mhm.
Max 15 amps.
Oh, so it's like a regular
120
That's a lot.
household circuit.
Yeah.
Okay, and where,
For your Ion 5.
right, so the newer car that's able to put
Right.
power out, and where did you get this from?
I had to buy it online because I couldn't find it in dealerships. Actually, none of the dealerships in Texas would sell it because they don't sell the cars. So they're not allowed to sell
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
accessories.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, and so it was from Hyundai online? Okay, Great, great, because I wasn't sure it was maybe third party
No.
and so forth, but this is great that Hyundai is recognizing people want to be able to run, yeah, 15 amps. Yeah, yeah.
Unless it's got communication, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the idea of,
So the 110 volt AC 60 hertz comes from the inverter on the car. Because there's no inverter in that thing, and that just sees battery batteries. So it comes from the vehicle inverter.
that could have an inverter in it. I mean, I have a,
just load, right? Enough to be system.
No, I don't think it. What, 15 times,
I mean,
140, that's something
15
like
amps
that.
is
That's 1,800 watts.
1,800 watts, yeah.
No, that's good. Inverter, that's.
Inverter is not.
No, okay, so it is the car.
Unless you have a dedicated inverter on the car specifically, as opposed to the VFD, variable frequency drivers, to make any curve, but it keys in the 60.
And it also looks great.
And actually, no, the car also has an internal,
You
there's
gotta-
also that plug that you saw on. the inside.
And that was.
So maybe you guys have to go to inverter for both that
That's a
and.
good question.
Yeah, and it's just using the pins in 1772 to provide power to that
But,
outlet.
yeah, both of them are tapping into the vehicle battery.
Right.
It's unclear otherwise. No, it's.
Yeah, so as Emma mentioned, in the car, there's also a regular one from the outlet, AC.
At least you can use simultaneously.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is it
okay.
also, you know, the water?
Oh,
The
you know,
inside plug.
in the car, I can't remember what the number was, but I think it's similar was.
Similar, I think it is.
That's very cool.
That is great, yeah, I mean, the advances that are coming out now with the cars. it's fantastic.
That's the only one available as of today. Is that right?
That I know of, yeah, I mean, the other car makers have talked about it, I mean, everybody knows about the
Have you
stories.
tried it?
I tried it. I got it yesterday in the mail, and I immediately went down to my car.
Oh, of course.
Tried it.
Did you plug a hair dryer in?
No, not yet. I started the light and then I started the speaker.
So you didn't stress it up to the
No.
1,800
I
watts.
need a picture of this, Dave. This is worthy of putting on the website.
It is.
I get a picture of me with it plugged into the car. It was fun.
Yeah, we can go outside the car, it's gonna be that, but yeah, getting the unit.
I've got a belt sander in my phone.
Sure.
Well, that's great.
Something that would draw a bit of power.
Good, it's good, a good back. I'm gonna post this. I'll send it, Dave, I'll send a copy to you too.
Perfect. Right. Yeah.
It wasn't cheap.
It wasn't.
A lot of the websites were selling it for like $6.99 or something, but I was able to get this for Hyundai calls it vehicle to load adapter.
That's.
To,
Everything is gonna be like V2X.
Yeah, that is right. I think kind of in reference to what you're saying, Bill, a lot of manufacturers are looking this direction. So we all know, just over a year ago, we had the big Texas freeze. Folks with their gasoline powered Ford F-150s who had chosen the option to have it produce equal amounts of electricity compared to cigarette lighter amounts. That a lot of people just got into cars for decades. That that splashed all over social media so much that when Ford comes out with the F-150, I was just reading today, the Silverado, the Lightning, the electric versions of these vehicles, that in the writer's opinion, they were going to have to make this kind of power available in those vehicles, because people, like I said, from a year ago, they were just talking about gasoline F-150 providing power, so how could you have a F-150 Lightning and not have it provide power, to external loads? And so in Silverado, of course, you've got to keep up with Ford Lightning as they come out with electric vehicles. According to this writer, which makes sense that, once something gets out there, if you produce an inferior product, it's not going to find any buyers, everybody's going to want the full capability. Or they're not going to buy it at all. It's, sure, I could save $1,000, but the good is having a Ford F-150 Lightning. If it doesn't do that, and I could save instead of paying, $60,000, I think $9,000. Well, no, you got to have the full capability in the product. So yeah, that's great that Hyundai is leading that. You brought one from Atlanta here. Yeah. Very good, very good. Okay, so the family over here have any questions? Okay, you're just soaking it all up. That's great. Yeah, I love this. So, okay, so I will turn the camera back around here and so say the last few things that we've got going on here with our meeting. And so at the end of the chat, I see Robert wrote the new Evolve Houston brochure is out. I emailed it to some of you. Okay. So yeah, I think anyone can probably Google Evolve Houston and it'll talk about how they've come out with this 21-page RISE document. So that's good. And so anyone online have any other comments, questions? So as I said, we will not have a meeting on the second Thursday of April because just a few days before that, we have the Sunday event.
Next month.
Correct, next month. But I'm working on someone for May. And so, and of course, we always love to hear about people's projects. I kind of expect John to tell us if he's gotten any changes on Dotson and Watson in the works or anything like that. You have some changes in the works? Oh, well, tell us.
Sorry, I was on the story.
Oh, no, that's a good. No, that's good because yeah, I love hearing that sun is expanding. Yeah. Yeah. So what's happening with Dotson and Watson?
Oh, I ended up running for a while actually. I sold the controller, traded for a Nissan Leaf inverter set.
Okay.
And I was going to put that in my truck. And then I bought the open source control board and I got it running. The Nissan Leaf motor running in my garage. But I couldn't do it in the truck. So I was like, stupid. I was like, I already took the motor out of the engine out of the truck. And so then I decided, I was like, well, the truck really would be better to have a Tesla motor would fit better. Analyze all the cost of this since I have the motor out. Actually, I bought this phone because I had an iPhone 6, which was real old. And I bought iPhone 13 specifically so I could do the FaceTime 3D modeling. Because the FaceTime and apps that use it to do really good 3D modeling. So you can do the face, you have to do it opposite. Yeah. You do this and you can put 3D models into with the iPhone. As long as you have FaceTime, there's the apps that you like. I was able to actually do a whole intermediate product. You got a 3D model that you know on your computer? Yeah. Because it was a large space, wasn't so great, but I was able to take, I did it in 2 half. It was enough to get enough measurements because there's other people who have done like really nice scans of like the Tesla documents. And so I was able to do that. It did. I did it. And it was like Wow. So I fit this Tesla front driving. And I also bought a control board for it. And I was on yesterday.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's 70 volts.
Yeah, I'm using the battery on my phone. So the open source board doesn't care. It'll run it on. It's the open board. It's the guy on YouTube, they do wire. He does a lot of this sort of. Honestly, there actually is a program. In very control of that system. So yeah, so I proved that I didn't waste my money. I didn't buy a drive. I didn't waste my money buying an open source board. I didn't waste my money taking everything apart and doing a bunch of software.
You got a new one.
Yeah, so all that stuff was good. So the truck, so the truck still tons of work. It's a massive problem. Want to put these on the rear. So I would have dual motor vehicle with a giant battery, but it's money. I'm already like, I swear, I'm 6 months into this project already. So we were talking about the dumpster. I got it running because I had to get it out of my garage. So I used it. And so I bought a new controller for the dumpster. Actually, I had a new controller. I had 1,000 amps controller. So I put a zilla in there and I water cooled it. I put a PC water cooling system on it. And it runs better than that. I took it. It's in my dad's garage. He drives.
Yeah. All right.
That's all.
Well, if Dr. Watson is driving, then maybe you could bring it on April 10th.
Yeah, I could. Actually.
That would be great, because the variety is the size of like that. We don't want all of our and it shows people how things have progressed, and to have an actively usable conversion there as well. I think it's great. I know you also have some signs. It's a good question whether they would, I mean, it's a world unto itself when they bring out those cars and boats. I know that he wants new modern, that's what cars ask for. And so that's why I said it really we proved it even more by what you brought me here today. So that because I'm sure that the folks there that would love to know how our outcome. So yeah, at least one Tesla I'm sure that they would want to have there. Another one would be a Model Y, supposed to be a Model 2. And so, as I said, I'm probably not going to be in town.
And they said something about the one car there is Friday afternoon, they want to take it Sunday, so I assume the car is staying there.
Correct.
You leave it there for the 48 plus hours.
Yeah, we park it either on the grass or at the basically spot.
But I would see the plastic cars.
We do. People making car covers and things like that. Not to say that there isn't an exception, but they have so many cars there. I guarantee they're not moving all those cars.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so they want them in on Friday because people start coming early on Saturday to see the cars and photos. And so things have to be set up for Saturday morning. And I just can't imagine not in town. Like I said, car covers, absolutely. I bet folks come with their car covers.
You guys are. You got it all.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I definitely don't think I would be this.
No, no, no. you wouldn't. Yeah,
Show off.
yeah, the whole- No, but if you were there, you wanted
Right.
to talk to folks about it, or to put it, say, on the dashboard or the sign or something like that. That says this folks are to go or for it. You know, the one that said those, you know, someone that doesn't have a PPE battery system. needs to put it refrigerator. Or another thing, something like that. Yeah, just a sign with that on the dashboard or something like that. I think and that, I think is what Bob is trying to do, is show people where the cars are at. The areas. So, yeah, it's fantastic. That we have it anywhere. How can we purchase? Takes a little more effort than a typical car purchase, but you went through that. By driving.
It's not a feature that we use.
Yeah.
It means that the car can be accessible.
Yeah. I can do that. It's all-
Yeah, yeah.
Because we want to come out and say that the film, yeah, the battery day last year. It was like, you know,
Well, of course, Tesla sells stationary batteries, whereas sometimes, as far as I know, they sell.
yeah, we don't want to cannibalize solar. The battery.
Right.
And it doesn't want people to put like extra cycles. That were flex.
Right.
Even though Century is way more energy than that. That thing is like, it blows like 20 miles. Well, it blows 15 miles long.
Yeah, yeah, it's something else
15 miles.
around the electronics.
No. I'm gone for 10 hours or whatever, if I come back, it's has to be 15 hours.
From
Just the camera.
Here in the future, because I
Would it be heating the batteries?
I thought that,
Yeah, maybe.
If it's considering the car on, it could be doing other things, because the electronics are just as entry, and it's cameras and recording.
We always
Yeah.
walk away and the car locks. Pulls in gears and all that stuff. It's looking at the app, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
So, part of it's fun.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. I've only owned this car for a few months. So it's been cold. Yeah, so it's fun. I'm not, I have no garage space. I need a new home. I know, right? Why am I even trying to put solar on that house? What's wrong? You go buy a new house.
Okay. Anything else folks want to bring up? Bill or anyone?
I'll have my, look at my container, for 2 months from now, container on converting to something.
Okay. All right. All right,
So
so
there won't be.
in April, we are using the Sunday, April 10th. Event starting the basic meeting 4 days later. We will not come to TXRX. Bill, don't let them forget us. So they won't see us in April.
It's changed. All righty. We'll wrap it up then. All right, thanks, folks. We will see you, those who can make it up on Discovery Green on Sunday, April 10th, and we'll see everyone else in May, on second Thursday. Yep, see you, Mo. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, and then you see the- Awesome. I know what it was at first.